Around you, the golden morning light rolls across the reed-choked riverbanks. Fishermen cast nets with a quiet rhythm. Somewhere nearby, a priest chants over a pot of goose fat and frankincense. You probably won't survive this as a modern dental patient, unless you consider moldy bread a viable treatment. And spoiler alert, they definitely did. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing how many corners of the world we're drifting off in. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You start your day in Thebes around 1500 BCE. Your mouth hurts not enough to cry, just enough to frown every time you chew. Maybe it's from the barley bread you bit into last night. It was dense, crusty, and probably embedded with a few grains of ground down sandstone. That's the downside of Egyptian agriculture. The flour was good, but the grinding stones weren't exactly stainless steel. As you shuffle through the market, the smells hit you. First sweet date wine, sharp garlic, and the faintly sour aroma of fermented fish paste. The scent almost distracts you from your aching jaw almost. You pass a vendor selling linen bandages, dyed with indigo, and another hawking hippo ivory amulets, for general protection, including according to his whispered upsell against pain of the mouth. But pain is common, very common. Ancient Egyptian skulls show an alarming number of worn-down teeth, exposed pulp, and infected abscesses. Historians still argue whether this is due more to the high-fibre diet or the grit from their grindstones. But either way, dental discomfort is basically part of life. Even the rich aren't immune, though they might complain more poetically about it. Your friend Beck, a labourer who works on a noble's tomb, grins at you with precisely 3 teeth. "You still got that back one hurting?" he asks cheerfully, gnawing on a boiled onion like it's a sweet fig. "You should go see old Paneb. He does teeth, kind of." Paneb, the local healer or SWNW, is not what you'd call a trained oral surgeon. He's a former scribe who took up medicine after his scroll-copying hand gave out. Now he works from a corner of the temple precinct, surrounded by papyri jars of dried herbs and several surprisingly sharp bronze tools. You make your way toward the healing house, passing children playing with carved lion toys and elders weaving baskets with their feet. There's a kind of peace here, even if your gums are throbbing like a drumbeat. Paneb greets you with a tired smile. Molar upper or lower?" he asks without preamble, squinting at you like a hawk, sizing up its prey. He doesn't wait for your answer. "Don't worry, we'll try the moldy bread first." "Wait, what?" "Yes, moldy bread. You're handed a paste made from grain that's been left to sprout some very suspicious fuzz. Paneb smears it onto a piece of linen and tells you to hold it against the sore spot. "It'll fight the spirits," he says sagely, but then adds, "and maybe the swelling." Modern historians. They raise their eyebrows here. Was it an early form of penicillin? Did the Egyptians intuitively stumble on antibiotic mould before Alexander Fleming ever picked up a petri dish? Or was this all wishful thinking, wrapped in ancient optimism? For now, though, it's cool against your inflamed gum, and that's good enough. Outside the city buzzes with gentle industry. Farmers ferry bundles of flax down the canals. Temple singers practice scales. Cats, dozens of them, prowl the rooftops with holy indifference. You sit quietly as the bread paste does its mysterious work, wondering how many other people came through this same door with mouths full of pain and left with mouths full of slightly less pain. Above you, a painted ceiling shows the goddess Sekhmet lion-headed and fierce, known to cause and cure plagues. You hope she's in a healing mood today. Paneb checks on you, nods and mutters something about good mould this season. He offers you a sip of palm wine for the discomfort. Not that it'll help much, but hey, it's the thought that counts. Later that evening you rest beside the Nile, watching the crocodiles slide silently through the reeds. The ache hasn't left completely, but it's faded tucked into the background, behind the rustle of papyrus leaves and the soft drumming of a distant festival. You try not to think too much about the bread. or how many other mouths it's been in. The pain returns the next morning like a loyal friend you never asked for. It pulses just behind your right cheek, a dull rhythmic throb in sync with your heartbeat. The mouldy bread compress helpful, but temporary. And that's the reality here in ancient Egypt. There's no such thing as a permanent dental fix. There's only management, pain management, faith management, and most of all, expectation management. So you do what every average Egyptian does: you eat. A lot. You chew through your breakfast flat barley bread, some dried dates, and a sprinkling of lentils, and every bite brings a little more wear and tear to your increasingly fragile molars. Let's talk about that bread for a second. Egyptian bread isn't quite what you might imagine. There's no crusty sourdough loaf, no pillowy pita puffed full of warm air. It's more like a dense brick of nutrition and mild danger. The flour is ground in stone mortars, porous, worn-down basins that shed microscopic grains of quartz limestone and even bits of bronze into the dough. These weren't filtered out. Why would they be? A little crunch builds character. Over time, chewing this stuff quite literally sandpapers your teeth. Archaeological studies of mummies have shown teeth worn, flat enamel stripped away until only the most stubborn, unfortunate stumps remain. Historians still argue whether this dental destruction was a known consequence or just the cost of convenience. But judging by the sheer number of abscesses and jawbone infections found in even upper-class remains, it's clear the diet was not exactly gum-friendly. And yet you eat it because it's food, and you're hungry. Beside you, your neighbour Tia cradles a bowl of cooked emmer wheat. She's got a small piece of honeycomb tucked in the corner of her mouth, like a makeshift lozenge. Helps with the sting, she tells you. You try it, she's not wrong. After breakfast, the streets come alive, with noise, low, nonchalant noise. Egypt doesn't shout, it hums. You pass a group of young boys throwing pebbles at a wall, chanting the names of gods as if invoking them in a playground ritual. One calls out "Sekhmet, fix my tooth," and everyone laughs. Even they know dental pain is just part of the background music of life here. By mid-morning, the sun is already high, casting angular shadows from the clustered mud brick homes. You catch the scent of charred fish from the riverfront and hear the rhythmic thump of mortar pounding against grain. Someone's grinding more flour, which means somewhere else more teeth are getting ready to suffer. You pause at a small wayside shrine tucked between houses. It's dedicated to Taweret, the hippo goddess who protects women and children. But someone's left a little offering of garlic cloves and an open-mouthed doll carved from clay, an unmistakable nod to mouth ailments. You murmur a little prayer under your breath. You're not sure it helps, but it feels like the right thing to do. Nearby, a group of men unload sacks of barley from a boat docked on the Nile. One of them, a burly man with a gap-toothed smile, grins at you. "Bread did this," he says, pointing at the black hole where a tooth once lived. Not even the crocodiles can bite that hard. You laugh because it's true. Bread may be sacred in Egypt. It's even used as currency in some professions, but it's also a silent destroyer, a slow-motion wrecking ball in your mouth. Later in the day, you stop by a stall that sells medicinal herbs. The old woman running it has a face like a sun-dried fig and eyes that flicker with amusement. "Let me guess," she croaks. "Tooth." You nod. She hands you a packet of dried celery seeds, ground coriander, and a pinch of natron, the salty soda-like substance Egyptians used for mummification, and apparently tooth rinses. You're told to mix it with water swish 3 times and spit toward the sun. That part's important, she insists. The gods notice. You try it later. It tastes like ancient sand and very old secrets, but somehow you feel slightly better. Maybe it's the natron. Maybe it's the placebo. Maybe it's the power of spitting with dramatic flair. By sunset, the city starts to quiet again. Torches flicker along the alleys, casting soft golden halos around doorways. You nibble at a bit of roasted goose tender, mercifully soft, and watch as the sky shifts from blue to apricot to the velvety purple of twilight. Your tooth still hurts, but now you know why. It's the flour, the sand, the stones, the chewing, the constant erosion. Everyone here knows it, Everyone accepts it. It's baked into the culture literally. And still they smile. Gapped, jagged, worn-down smiles, but smiles nonetheless. Tomorrow maybe you'll try another mouldy bread compress, or honey, or another amulet, but for tonight the pain dulls just enough to let you fall asleep, until breakfast, and the next chew begins the cycle again. You wake up the next morning with a mouth that feels like it's been cursed by a jealous demigod. The ache has settled deeper now, blooming from your jaw all the way into your temple. Every heartbeat pulses like a drum inside your skull. At this point, you're starting to wonder if this is just your new normal. Still, you drag yourself out into the crisp morning air. The Nile is wrapped in mist herons, picking delicately through the reeds. It's peaceful in a way that makes your mouth hurt a little less until you remember that even the dead weren't spared from this kind of pain. In fact, they took it with them. You make your way to a quiet necropolis at the edge of the city, where workers are preparing a tomb for a recently deceased noblewoman. You're not here for a funeral. You're here for information, because if you want to understand just how deeply toothaches haunted the ancient Egyptians, you need to look at what they buried, along with their dead. Turns out mummies have a lot to say, or at least their teeth do. Archaeologists today have scanned hundreds of skulls from mummified remains. Many of them, especially those of adults, show signs of chronic dental disease cavities worn to the root-cracked molars, abscesses that drilled small holes right into the jawbone. One particularly famous mummy, Pharaoh Ramses II, has such severe dental deterioration that experts suspect he was in excruciating pain for years before he died. And this was royalty. Imagine what Beck, your three-toothed friend, must have gone through. You peer into the half-built tomb where artisans are painting delicate hieroglyphs on the wall. The woman being buried here is of high status, judging by the number of turquoise necklaces and linen shrouds being arranged. She lived a comfortable life. But as the embalmers prepare her body, you notice something: a small box set beside her head, filled with dried herbs, resin, and a wad of linen with suspicious brown-green stains. Mouldy bread again. Apparently, she took her treatment into the afterlife. It's a strange detail, and yet it fits. The Egyptians believed in continuity, that what you needed in this life, you'd also need in the next. That included food cosmetics, and evidently home remedies for throbbing gums. Some tombs even include small bronze dental tools, carefully wrapped and placed near the head, just in case the spirits decided to throw in a little tooth rot along the eternal journey. Historians still argue whether these inclusions were symbolic gestures or actual emergency kits for the dead. Maybe they feared that spiritual decay mirrored physical decay, that if your teeth went bad in life, your soul might carry the stain forever. You wander deeper into the tomb's passageway. It's cool and dim lit by flickering oil lamps. In the shadows, you spot something carved into the stone, a line of hieroglyphs next to the image of a man holding his jaw in obvious pain, with a sun disk and serpent overhead. It's a depiction of the god Thoth, patron of wisdom, and also, apparently, of teeth knowledge. Above the carving is a phrase loosely translated as "let the word soothe and the mould cure," which sounds suspiciously like something your modern dentist might print on a very ironic sticker. Later you meet a young scribe named Senefer who's cataloguing burial goods for the temple archives. You mention the mouldy bread. He chuckles. Yes, we still use it sometimes. Some say it works. Others think it just distracts the pain long enough for the gods to notice your suffering. You ask him about dental care in the underworld. He nods solemnly. You don't want to arrive in Duat, the Egyptian afterlife, with a cursed mouth. If your words are unclear, the gods won't hear your petitions. And if your breath offends them... He doesn't finish the sentence, just grimaces and adjusts his linen collar. As the sun begins to dip behind the palm trees, casting long shadows across the city of the dead, you take a final look at the tombs dotting the hills. So many lives, so many toothaches frozen in time. You picture them sailing across the celestial Nile, mouths still sore, still chewing phantom bread, in ghostly silence. And yet they were prepared armed with mould copper tools, maybe a prayer or two, and the sheer, stubborn belief that even in death comfort mattered. You head back into the living city, mouth still aching, mind oddly at peace. Because if the dead could deal with it, so can you. By now you've probably noticed a pattern. Nobody in ancient Egypt is escaping dental pain, not even the highest of the high. And that brings you to the ultimate test of ancient tooth care royal dentistry. You're summoned more like beckoned politely, by a temple scribe who heard from Paneb that you were interested in mouth troubles. That's putting it lightly. Regardless, you follow him into a shaded courtyard lined with palm trees and stone columns. In the centre, a high-ranking priest prepares a ritual for the Perunk, the House of Life, a place of healing and knowledge. And as it turns out, the closest thing ancient Egypt had to a dental office. Your guide whispers, "Today is a good day." The royal healer is demonstrating treatment for one of the pharaoh's advisors. You may observe if you remain quiet. You nod reverently and slip into the cool shadows. The scene is both sacred and unsettling. A man sits propped up on a padded reed chair, his head tilted slightly, mouth open. His linen headdress is folded neatly at his feet, and two assistants fan him with palm leaves. Nearby, a tray of tools gleams in the sun-bronze probes, polished flint scrapers, and what looks suspiciously like a small hook. Your own gums flinch in sympathy. The healer steps forward. He's no dusty village Saruanu like Paneb. This man wears the gold-edged sash of a temple physician trained in the highest rituals. He chants softly to Thoth and Sekhmet, his fingers steady, as he places a poultice guess, what it's moldy bread again, along the inside of the advisor's cheek. It will draw out the bad blood, he murmurs, and remind the gods to send comfort. And then with the sort of calm you only gain from decades of doing this without anesthesia, he lifts a tool and begins to prod the inflamed area. You look away, just for a moment. You can't help but wonder, did the pharaoh himself get this treatment? Did someone once do this to Ramses, Tutankhamun, Hatshepsut? Actually, yes, sort of. Mummified remains of Egyptian royals suggest they too were subject to early forms of dental intervention. Some even show evidence of primitive dental surgery. One skull, possibly that of a high-ranking noble, bears traces of gold wire used to stabilize loose teeth, arguably one of the earliest orthodontic devices in recorded history. Gold wire, elegant, painful, and almost definitely ceremonial. Historians still debate whether such procedures were therapeutic or symbolic. Was the wire used in life to ease tooth movement, or added in death to make a body whole for the afterlife? It's one of those beautiful ambiguities that ancient Egypt offers in abundance. Back in the courtyard, the advisor is now sipping warm water laced with honey and myrrh. His face is pale, but his jaw looks less swollen. Or maybe that's just your hope projecting onto his face. You're not sure. The healer turns and notices you. Your jaw aches, he says, more statement than question. You nod. He smiles. You chew too much bread. Try soft figs for a few days, and speak to the gods more often. You murmur a thank you and slip away, processing the experience. The care shown here is real, devout even, but it's not scalable. Not for the masses hauling grain-baking sand-heavy bread and slowly grinding their molars to dust. This kind of treatment, it's reserved for the few. The precious, the divine adjacent. So what does that leave the rest of Egypt with? As you pass through the temple gates, you spot a servant holding a tray of offerings, pomegranates, garlic, and a modest brick of bread, studded with flecks of blue-green fuzz. He catches your eye. For the mouth, he says proudly. Of course it is. You smile carefully and move on, cheeks, sore curiosity blooming. You've seen what the elite do when their mouths betray them. But what about the everyday folk? The bakers and brewers, the women stirring porridge with children clinging to their legs, the farmers chewing date pits to stay awake during irrigation season. They don't get priests and gold wire. They get onions, prayers, and mouldy bread. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Now you know the elite's approach, elegant, ritualistic, and generously slathered in mouldy bread. But for most of Egypt's population, medical care wasn't quite so gilded. It was earthy, improvised, passed down through neighbours' grandmothers, and anyone who could convincingly hold a jar of herbs and mutter something sacred-sounding. You make your way back through the alleys of Thebes, where the smell of baking bread and dung smoke floats lazily in the midday heat. A small boy runs past you, barefoot, giggling, his cheeks stuffed with something sticky. His grandmother stands nearby, mashing herbs in a bowl with a pestle that's definitely seen better millennia. "Is it for his tooth?" you ask gently. She grins, revealing 2 remaining teeth, both leaning at improbable angles. "His mouth burns," she says matter-of-factly. "Too many sweet figs." She holds up a small pot and shows you the mixture inside. It's a gritty paste-fermented barley, a splash of goat's milk, crushed lotus seeds, and yes, a generous helping of mouldy bread. It smells like the bottom of a forgotten pantry. She stirs it proudly. "This calms the heat," she explains, dabbing some of it onto a cloth. "It draws out the demon of pain." You watch her gently press it against the boy's cheek. He squirms for a moment, but then relaxes. Maybe it's the coolness, maybe it's just the attention. Maybe the bread really does carry some kind of primitive antibiotic magic. Historians still argue whether the mould strains used had medicinal properties, or if Egyptians were just impressively committed to the placebo effect. You keep walking and soon arrive at a neighbourhood oven, a communal affair where women bake side by side. The heat is stifling. The laughter is not. You hear a baker complain mid-laugh about another tooth breaking, and her friend waves a flatbread like a fan. Chew with the other side. Dental survival strategy: avoid the crumblier corners of bread. The bakery's flour sacks are piled high, but as you lean closer, you notice something: tiny sparkling grains, mixed into the powdery white. Sand. Not much, but just enough. The kind you wouldn't taste, but your molars would feel. The grain comes in from the fields, gets ground on basalt and limestone slabs, and no one bothers to sift. Why would they? It's been this way for centuries. Everyone's got a sore spot in their mouth, and nobody's got time to start sieving flour when there are tombs to be built, temples to clean, and clothes to weave. You step inside a potter's shop next a shaded nook with shelves of dusty vessels. The potter, an older man named Nebet, sits cross-legged by the kiln. His mouth is twisted into a permanent wince. "Baking pots is easier than baking bread," he says. "Clay doesn't grind your teeth down." He lifts a small jar from a shelf and shows you a hardened lump inside. "From my daughter's wedding. The priest gave it to me when I complained about this ache." He taps his jaw. Bread and mould, sacred. You notice a recurring theme. Bread, mould, sacred. It's a trifecta that keeps popping up, and not by accident. Egyptians treated health as a spiritual matter. Every ailment had a physical side and a divine cause. If your gums throbbed, it wasn't just from chewing on rock-laced dough. It could be the wrath of a slighted god, or the result of a bad alignment in the stars. That meant healing had to be two-pronged: physical remedy and metaphysical apology. So mouldy bread wasn't just medicine, it was a symbol of humility, of submission to higher powers, of earthly bodies needing celestial mercy. You pass a small shrine on your way home. A woman kneels beside it, whispering over a bowl of water and crushed mint. She spits into it gently 3 times. Then she pours the mixture around a stone statue of Sekhmet. The lion-headed goddess again. She's everywhere. Protector and punisher. Healer and destroyer. And evidently deeply invested in dental health. The woman finishes her ritual, touches the statue's feet, and smiles at you through swollen gums. She listens, she says simply. The sun is setting again. You find your way back to your own corner of the city, your mouth still aching, but your mind strangely soothed. There's comfort in knowing that across Egypt, among bakers, potters, mothers, and priests, the pain you carry is understood, shared, passed down like a recipe, and in most cases, served with a side of fuzzy bread. The next morning you wake to the sound of a street vendor singing about onions, loudly, and off-key. It's oddly soothing. Your jaw still throbs, but you're getting used to it, sort of like living next to a temple gong, annoying at first, then just part of the background. Today you're chasing something more curious than the mouldy bread itself. You've seen it spread on linen compresses, mashed into pastes and buried in tombs, But now it's time to understand why Egyptians thought it worked. It starts naturally with saliva. You make your way to a local healer who specialises in the meeting of flesh and spirit. His hut smells of frankincense and something vaguely vinegary. He's an old man named Kasa, his voice low and musical, like he's always telling a bedtime story. You cannot fix the mouth he tells you without speaking to the gods through it. You nod politely, wondering if this will involve chanting or maybe another herbal gargle. Instead, he hands you a scroll. A real one. Papyrus inked with instructions. It's part of what modern scholars call the Ebers Papyrus, though Kasa just calls it the Old Remedies. The section he opens to is titled roughly, For a Tooth That Roars. The recipe: chew on a mixture of dried sycamore fig ground malachite and your own saliva. Then spit it out while invoking the name of Horus. You blink. The patient saliva, you ask. Kasa nods. Saliva carries the sickness. It also carries the soul. That is why it must be both used and expelled. And suddenly you understand part of what makes these treatments work isn't just what they are, but what they mean. It's ritual, a performance of care as much about symbolic cleansing as physical relief. You let him apply a new mixture to your gum. There's mould in it again, of course, but also crushed cumin, powdered copper, and something you think might be juniper. It stings slightly. He chants under his breath. You don't catch all the words, but the rhythm of it washes over you. Afterward, he places a carved amulet in your hand. It's shaped like a tiny tooth, with a falcon's eye etched in the centre. For protection, he says. Outside, the sun glints off the Nile, and the city moves in its quiet way. Women grind grain with stone weights. Children chase one another with papyrus ropes. And you start to notice just how much emphasis Egyptian culture places on the mouth. The mouth wasn't just for eating, it was for speaking, for ritual, for commanding. When pharaohs died, elaborate ceremonies were performed to open their mouths again, literally, so they could speak and eat in the afterlife. Priests would use a special tool, the adze, to tap the lips of the mummy during burial rites. Without this, the spirit could not communicate, and that was unthinkable. So a toothache, a swollen gum, it wasn't just painful, it was spiritually disruptive. If your mouth didn't function, your prayers might falter, your connection to the divine might be misaligned. Historians still argue whether this symbolic role of the mouth contributed to the obsession with oral treatments, or if it was simply a response to a culture plagued by dental decay. But one thing is clear to Egyptians: a sick mouth was more than a nuisance. It was a threat to identity, to ritual, to the self. Later you pass by the temple of Sekhmet again, and find a scribe outside painting charms onto amulets shaped like molars. He lets you hold one. It's smooth, made of faience, glazed in a colour close to turquoise. She punishes through pain, he says reverently, but she also listens to offerings. You nod and place it back. The charm is beautiful but heavy in a metaphorical way. That night you sit by a small brazier outside your home. The air smells of cinnamon bark and coal smoke. Beck joins you, his 3 remaining teeth gleaming proudly in the firelight. Still hurting, he asks. You shrug. He laughs. Then you're still alive. He hands you a fresh piece of flatbread, warm, soft, and mercifully free of visible sand. You chew slowly, savouring every tooth-friendly bite. Because here, healing isn't just about what you put on the wound. It's about what you believe while you do it. Today you're visiting the unsung heroes of Egyptian civilization, the labourers. The ones who build the temples, carve the tombs, dig the canals, and grind their teeth literally on the bread that fuels their bodies. These are not men and women of silk and gold. These are the calloused hands and cracked molars of empire. You head to Deir el Medina, a bustling workers' village near the Valley of the Kings. Here generations of artisans lived and worked to create the very tombs that pharaohs would someday lie in. It's a place of surprising literacy gossip, and unsurprisingly, sore jaws. Your guide, a wiry man named Hetep, points out various homes with pride. That one belonged to a painter who never missed a day even when his teeth bled. That one over there, stonecutter, used to sleep with garlic in his mouth for the pain. You believe it. The tools of their trade chisels, hammers, and son weren't gentle, and neither were their diets. You duck into a modest home where a pot of lentils bubbles on a clay hearth, and loaves of barley bread cool on woven trays. Gritty loaves, you already know. The family here is preparing lunch. A girl of maybe 10 stirs a pot while her father sharpens a bronze blade. He's chewing thoughtfully on a clove, and when he sees you, he nods. Pain. You nod back. Word gets around. He offers you a clove. Chew slowly. Let the oil do its work. It numbs the gum. You accept, and the moment you bite down, your mouth fills with sharp heat. Your eyes water slightly. The girl giggles. This, apparently, is the peasant's anaesthetic. And it's not just cloves. They use anything that tingles, cools, or distracts: mint, onion, acacia, resin, myrrh. If it grows, they've probably tried it. You remember what Paineb once told you? Everything in Egypt is either sacred, useful, or both. Usually both. Later, Hetep takes you to the edge of the village, where a small shrine stands half buried in sand. It's dedicated to Taweret, the hippo goddess you've seen before. Someone has left an offering, a piece of bread, a few garlic cloves, and curiously, a small carved figure of a man clutching his face. The Egyptians were nothing if not literal. Inside one nearby home, you meet a young woman named Satsabek. Her husband works in the valley. She makes clothing for the community. She's quiet at first, but then you ask about tooth pain, and she opens up with all the authority of someone who's seen 3 generations of molar misery. We use whatever works, she says, laying out a small cloth bundle. Inside, dried mint, powdered ochre, a pinch of natron, and you guessed it, a crust of mouldy bread, hard as a brick. She tells you how her grandmother taught her to soak the bread in water, mash it with honey, and spread it along the gum line. Wrap it in linen. Say a prayer. Spit westward. The spit direction changes depending on who you ask, but everyone agrees that the act matters. Historians still debate how much of this worked biologically, and how much was psychological, but one thing's clear: the poor weren't passive sufferers. They did things. They blended healing with habit, faith with fungi, and that blending created a kind of resilience modern medicine still admires. You help Satsabek prepare a new poultice. She insists you learn the chant, a simple rhythmic invocation to repel the fire that chews the jaw. You mutter it under your breath. It feels strange but soothing, like you're part of something older than pain itself. That night you join the workers under a moonlit sky as they gather around a communal fire. Stories drift up with the smoke tails of gods and misbehaving teeth of crocodiles who guard herbal secrets of healers who once cured a pharaoh with nothing but garlic and a frog's breath. It's hard to tell where truth ends and myth begins, but it doesn't really matter, because here in the flickering glow, surrounded by people with aching jaws and strong spirits, the story is the medicine. And the bread's still mouldy, still sacred, still waiting in the corner, wrapped in cloth ready to soothe the next weary mouth. You've heard about them, seen traces of them, and now finally you're meeting one, a Sedu Nadabu. Not quite a doctor, not quite a priest. The SBW occupies a fascinating, ambiguous role in ancient Egyptian life. He, or occasionally, she is part healer, part ritualist, part trusted neighbourhood expert. Think of them as the friendly person down the street, who's treated everything from broken ankles to bee stings with a mix of sacred scrolls and homebrew. Your SWNW is named Nefru, and his tiny home smells like an apothecary, and a spice stall got into a very polite argument. You spot bundles of dried herbs hanging from the rafters, a few clay jars sealed with wax, and in the centre of it all, a low stone bench that looks suspiciously like it's been used for tooth extractions. Recently, Nefru greets you with the tired cheerfulness of a man who has seen far too many people wince in the last 24 hours. Jaw, yes, he says, before you even sit down. You nod, you're past the point of small talk. He gestures for you to recline, and then begins to examine your mouth with the grace of someone who's done this hundreds of times. He murmurs as he prods gently, swelling yes, a little pus possibly. You chew too hard. Do you like lentils? You do like lentils. That's your problem, he says flatly. And the bread, always the bread. Then he reaches for his tools, bone bronze obsidian, a small copper hook, a pestle, a delicate little spoon. You get the distinct sense that none of this is sterilised, but you're already here, and your jaw has gone numb with familiarity. He mixes something in a shallow bowl, crushed coriander barley beer, mouldy bread, and oddly, a bit of powdered turquoise. To calm the spirits, he explains, and to make the mixture beautiful. Egyptians believed in beauty as a form of harmony. A beautiful remedy was more likely to succeed. Nefru smears the paste onto a strip of linen and presses it against your aching gum. It's surprisingly cooling. The beer adds a faint fizz. The mould smells ripe. You leave that there, he says, settling beside you. Breathe through your nose. If your ancestors like you, you'll feel better by sunset. You glance at the wall beside you. There's a painted scene, a man and woman kneeling before Thoth holding their mouths. The god touches them lightly on the cheek. The caption beneath reads, "May the voice be unbroken." That phrase again, voice. You realise something. For the Egyptians, this wasn't just about dental health. It was about preserving speech. If your mouth failed, your ability to pray, to recite, to communicate was threatened. A sick tooth was a silent danger. Nefru nods as if reading your thoughts. You think we treat pain, he says. We treat speech. You must be able to call your gods, yes. You sit in silence for a while, linen pressed against your gums, surrounded by the gentle clink of tools being cleaned, and the whisper of incense smoke curling through the rafters. Nefru busies himself grinding more ingredients, labelling them with faint scratches on the jars. He works slowly, reverently. Outside you hear the bleating of a goat and a child yelling about a stolen fig. Life goes on. Eventually, Nefru removes the compress. Your mouth feels not healed but quieter. The throb is a background murmur now. You can almost pretend it's gone. He nods. The bread was good today. Before you leave, he hands you a small cone of beeswax mixed with mint oil. For rubbing, he says. Or chewing if you're brave. You pocket it and thank him. Not just for the treatment, but for the peace, the care, the sense that even in a world without anaesthesia, someone will still hold your face with gentle hands and try their best. As you step into the street, the sun is lower, and the air has taken on that golden haze you're coming to love. You pass a boy drawing pictures in the dirt. One is a stick figure, clutching his jaw. The other has a giant tooth floating above its head, like a halo. You chuckle softly. The next generation is already preparing. You take a detour on your way home, your mouth still tingling faintly from the WNW's latest concoction. For once, the ache has softened into something manageable, like a mosquito buzzing in another room, rather than gnawing at the base of your skull. That's a win. But instead of heading straight back, you follow your nose, quite literally, because drifting through the air is the unmistakable scent of something odd. Sweet, spicy burnt. You turn the corner and find yourself outside a small stall, manned by a woman with henna'd hands, and eyes lined in kohl so precisely you suspect divine assistance. Her name is Dedi. She is not a healer, not officially, but people come to her for other things. Smoother skin, longer life, fertility, and apparently relief from the mouth demons. She waves you over. You walk like someone whose teeth bite back. You nod grimly, often and without warning. She cackles and pulls a stool forward. Sit, I will distract your pain. And oh, does she. Dedi's approach to health is, shall we say, experimental. She offers you a tasting plate of her own concoctions, tiny samples of ancient Egyptian wellness trends that would make even the bravest influencer hesitate. You try a paste made of mashed dates and pig fat said to loosen tight jaws, then a syrup of honey and chopped cucumber root to cool the throat of fire, and finally, the infamous crocodile dung sunscreen. You pause. Wait, this goes on the face. She beams. Yes, but the brave eat it too, only a pinch. You decline politely. Still, she explains that such mixtures were believed to have more than cosmetic value. Crocodiles were divine beasts, dangerous, sure, but sacred. Their excrement was thought to carry protective power, both as a ward against sunburn and, in a few fringe cases, as a fever remedy. Historians today mostly agree this was not medically sound. But Dedi disagrees. "I have not burned in years," she insists, rubbing a suspiciously green salve into her arms. She offers to make you a tooth balm. You nod hesitantly. She whips up something with honey-powdered myrrh clove oil and a touch of fermented fig. A luxury mix, she declares, fit for a prince, or someone whose mouth keeps interrupting his sleep. You apply a bit, and to your great surprise feel the ache diminish. A little, or maybe the scent of clove and fig is just relaxing you into a sense of placebo peace. But Dedi isn't just selling creams and charms. She's offering something else: control. A sense that even without formal tools or temple blessings, a person can push back against their pain with a few smelly, sticky ingredients and a lot of confidence. You thank her, tuck the little jar into your sash, and step back into the soft evening air. The streets are busier now, people returning from the fields, children balancing baskets, priests ringing tiny bells to signal the temple's closing rituals. And yet everyone carries the same quiet burden as bodies that hurt in small persistent ways. And so they turn to remedies, some sacred, some strange, some that make your modern brain raise an eyebrow so high it almost detaches. But here's the thing, every culture has its health fads, its wellness experiments, its snake oil and magic tinctures. Ancient Egypt was no different. And honestly, sometimes the strangest stuff is what brings the most comfort, not because it works chemically, but because it means someone cared enough to try. As you head home rubbing a bit more fig balm onto your jaw, you think about Dedi's wide grin. A mouth that laughs, she'd said, is too busy to hurt. Not exactly scientific, but oddly comforting. You've rubbed the balm, chewed the cloves chanted to Thoth, and let mouldy bread work its dubious magic. But there's one more part of Egyptian life that you haven't considered: the meaning of the mouth beyond the aches and ooze. You're about to discover that in ancient Egypt, oral hygiene was more than a health concern. It was a moral one, a spiritual one, and if you weren't careful, an offence to the gods themselves. The realization starts innocently, enough while watching a group of temple acolytes sweep the courtyard of the goddess Ma'at, deity of truth and balance. They move with quiet discipline, laying down offerings of salt and lotus flowers. One young girl is brushing her teeth. You blink. She's using a chew stick, a frayed twig from a tree you don't recognise. She's rubbing it over her teeth methodically, like she's polishing tiny statues. You've seen chew sticks before, but you never thought much of them. Turns out they're made from Salvadora persica, a tree known for its antimicrobial properties. Modern science calls it the toothbrush tree. The Egyptians called it part of the daily rites of cleanliness, especially before entering sacred spaces. You approach the girl's tutor, a robed man with blue lapis beads and a voice like a breeze in the dark. He sees you watching and nods. One must be clean in voice, as well as body, he says. So, this is hygiene. He smiles. This is worship. And now you're down the rabbit hole. You learn that temples often required priests to clean their teeth before rituals, just as they shaved their bodies and washed their hands. Bad breath wasn't just unpleasant, it was impure. A polluted mouth could disrupt prayer, displease a deity, or corrupt a ceremony. Imagine standing before Osiris with onion breath. Unthinkable. Historians still discuss how widespread this oral reverence was. Some believe it was limited to the elite and clergy. Others argue it was embedded in daily life, passed along with lullabies and cooking tips. But the evidence is compelling. Chew sticks found in tombs, recipes for breath-freshening rinses recorded on papyri, and amulets shaped like open mouths, often placed on the dead to ensure they could speak in the afterlife. Speaking was everything. The ancient Egyptians believed words had power, real tangible power. You could bless with them, curse with them, move the gods with them, but only if they were clear, confident, and ideally delivered without the scent of yesterday's fermented lentils. You walk along the temple corridors and spot a wall carving of a ritual known as the opening of the mouth. It shows a priest touching a mummy's lips with a ceremonial blade, a symbolic act to restore speech in the next world. You've seen this before, but now it lands differently. This isn't a quaint tradition, it's a lifeline. Without a functional mouth, you couldn't ask forgiveness, you couldn't speak your name to the divine judges, you couldn't argue your innocence when your heart was weighed against the feather of Ma'at. Suddenly your toothache feels less annoying and more existential. Later that day, you pass through the home of a weaver who's preparing for her father's burial. On the table beside his canopic jars is a small clay pot of ground cinnamon and mint a final breath offering, so his mouth stays sweet for Osiris, she explains. There's something touching in that, tender even. Because behind all the chants and remedies and cheek-stuffing compresses is a deep desire to stay connected to others, to the gods, to one's own story. A healthy mouth was the gateway to identity. A rotting one that was silence, disconnection, disappearance. You remember Dedi's words, a mouth that laughs is too busy to hurt, and now you'd add, a mouth that speaks is too sacred to ignore. That evening you rinse your mouth with warm water and natron just as Nefru recommended. It doesn't taste great, but it feels right. And when you whisper a sleepy prayer to the stars, you do it with your whole aching jaw. Because here in ancient Egypt, even pain has a purpose. You're becoming something of an expert now. You recognise the difference between a chew stick and a clove poultice at a glance. You can tell when someone's just had a compress removed from the slightly sour smell of mould and myrrh, and you've started to accept that mouth pain is not an emergency here, it's a lifestyle. But today you're after something more elusive, the recipes. You've heard them mentioned in passing, scribbled on temple scrolls, whispered by healers, scratched into the margins of old medical papyri. And now you're at a scriptorium seated beside a young apprentice named Nebamun, who smells like ink dust and simmering ambition. He shows you a document he's just copied a section from what modern historians call the Hearst Papyrus. It's older than most you've seen, and the section you're reading is titled 4 Pains of the Mouth, which burn like the eye of Ra. Catchy. You read slowly, your eyes scanning hieratic script like a sleepy crossword puzzle. One remedy stands out. Take crushed ochre mix with beer and honey. Press into linen. Speak the name of Sekhmet. Apply to the sore place. Simple, brutal, slightly alcoholic. Another lists ingredients that border on the mystical powdered donkey tooth, mixed with sycamore milk and ash of date pit, to be chewed thrice at sunrise while facing the Nile. Nebamun shrugs. I copied it, not invented it. He explains that papyri like these weren't written for fun. They were working documents passed down in the houses of life, the temples that functioned as schools, clinics and early libraries. Many were only partially copied, with pieces missing or damaged. Historians still argue whether the stranger recipes were literal, symbolic, or some kind of sacred pun lost to time. Still, there's consistency in what they recommend: moldy bread, honey natron, ochre fig sap, and if you're desperate, anything with a cooling or numbing effect. Sometimes the most obscure ingredient in the list is a phrase like "with words spoken gently." That part, absolutely mandatory. Nebamun pulls out a newer scroll, a sort of greatest hits collection. In it he's compiled a list of toothache treatments mentioned across various temples. You read aloud. Bread mouldy softened with beer. Frankincense smoke inhaled deeply. Mint and palm wine swished and spat 3 times. Crushed emeralds, if wealthy. Mud from Nile's edge, blessed by a priest. He leans in. Number 4 is mostly for show. Emeralds don't help, but they look divine in a jar. You both laugh. It hurts a little. Outside, the sound of a reed flute floats through the open window. A priest is chanting nearby, calling down blessings on a new shipment of grain. It's oddly rhythmic, almost soothing, and it reminds you music was part of healing too. The cadence of spoken words was believed to calm the soul and the body. That's why so many of these recipes include instructions to chant or recite while applying them. You wonder how many of these scrolls made it into everyday homes. Probably not many. Most common folk didn't read. but knowledge trickled down through midwives' market vendors and grandmothers with uncanny memories. You thank Neberman and head out into the narrow sunlit alleys, once more inspired. Back in your own corner of Thebes, you decide to try your hand at one of the more manageable recipes. You mash together a bit of honey mouldy bread and natron in a small bowl. The result looks like something you'd scrape off a poorly sealed wine jug, but it smells kind of sweet. You press it onto your gum, wait, breathe. And then, following the recipe's instructions, you whisper, not shout, the name of the goddess Sekhmet. Not because you expect divine lightning to shoot from the sky, but because honestly it's kinda nice to feel like someone might be listening, even if it's just the echoes of ancient voices wrapped in linen, cradled in jars, whispering comfort down the centuries. You've tried the mould, the chants, the poultices and prayers, and still there's that dull pulsing ache just under your right molar, like a reminder from the gods that history doesn't come without a little discomfort. So today you return to the question that started all of this. Why does everyone in ancient Egypt seem to have bad teeth? You set out for the home of a granary inspector, a man named Paddy, whose job revolves around one of Egypt's most sacred commodities, grain. He meets you with a friendly nod and offers a cup of barley beer so thick it could double as soup. We feed the kingdom, he says proudly, but the kingdom doesn't always thank us with healthy mouths. He's not wrong. Paddy invites you to inspect the granary. Inside are mountains of emmer and barley, carefully measured, weighed and, most importantly, stored in jars sealed with mud and straw. He shows you how they're ground daily into flour using hand stones. The same stones every household uses, and there's the problem. You kneel beside a millstone and run your hand along the surface. It's rough, crumbly, definitely shedding tiny bits of grit into every batch of flour. It's everywhere, Paddy says. We even find it in the teeth of mummies. He's right. Archaeological examinations of ancient Egyptian remains consistently reveal extreme tooth wear, enamel reduced to flat surfaces, roots exposed, abscesses boring into bone. Historians still argue over whether diet alone caused this, or if environmental factors like dust storms and windborne sand added to the problem. Either way, the result was a nation full of dental misery. And yet, oddly enough, cavities' actual decay from sugar were rare. Egyptians didn't eat a lot of processed sweets. Their sugar came from dates, honey, and the occasional festive fig. The real enemy wasn't bacteria, it was the grind, literally. Their daily bread came laced with the microscopic equivalent of sandpaper. Every bite shaved away a little more enamel. You chew on this thought gently, while Paddy hands you a small lump of raw flour. He asks you to look closely. In the sunlight, you can see the shimmer, tiny flecks of stone dust glinting like mischief. And this is the national staple. Bread isn't just food in Egypt, it's wages, it's religious offering, it's social glue. The word for to eat and to give even overlap with to give bread. When you serve the gods, you offer bread. When you pay a worker, it's often in loaves. No one questions the importance of bread, but maybe they should have asked what it was doing to their molars. Later that day, you meet a potter who tells you he once cracked a tooth on a single meal. Not even on the bread itself, he says with a laugh, but on the grit inside it. He pulls a small shard from a pouch, his lucky tooth piece, he calls it. Reminds me to eat slower. You start to see a pattern. The Egyptians knew this was happening. They joked about it, built little traditions around it. A cracked tooth wasn't unusual, it was practically expected. That night you sit by the fire with Beck again, your fellow pain veteran. He's gnawing on a boiled onion and offers one to you. No chewing, he promises, soft as sleep. You take it and rest your jaw. As the stars rise above the Nile and the breeze picks up the scent of warm sand and goat hair, you reflect on what you've learned. This wasn't negligence. This was survival. The Egyptians didn't just have bad teeth, they endured them. They adapted. They turned healing into ritual, pain into poetry, suffering into shared experience. And through it all, they still smiled, gapped and weary, but smiling nonetheless. Because the bread fed them. And the mould, well, that was just dessert. Now that you've felt the grindstone in your teeth and read the scrolls of the WNW, it's time to return to the question that's been buzzing in the background of your aching jaw this whole time. Did moldy bread actually work? You make your way to the edge of the temple district, where an older priest named Hui tends a small herb garden filled with plants used in both rituals and remedies. He's not a healer himself, but he's watched hundreds of years' worth of oral care figuratively and literally bloom, wilt and ferment beneath his fingertips. He hands you a sprig of mint to chew on as you ask your burning question. Was the mould medicine? He chuckles, which turns into a full belly laugh, then a cough. That's the question even Thoth doesn't answer directly. But you're not the only one asking it. Modern historians, archaeologists, and medical researchers have wondered the same thing. Because here's the strange part. Egyptians used mouldy bread to treat wounds long before science understood mould's bacterial killing properties. Some strains of bread mould, especially those growing on whole grains, in damp conditions can produce penicillin-like compounds, which raises the tantalizing question, did they stumble onto penicillin? Did ancient Egyptians unknowingly practice primitive antibiotic medicine, masked in rituals and linen? Historians still argue about this. Some believe the antibacterial effects were real if inconsistent. Others suggest the mould was symbolic a way of absorbing sickness or showing the body's decay reversed through divine rot. And some say it was both. Hui takes you to a jar sealed in beeswax. Inside is a carefully preserved bit of old bread, greenish-black, wrapped in fabric. Temple offering, he explains. Sometimes we place it near mouths. The mould draws pain away. He speaks like it's obvious. You inspect it closely. It's pungent and very fuzzy, but not dead. The mould is alive, thriving. In a weird way, it's beautiful, like a garden that forgot how to be polite. So maybe, just maybe, there's some biological merit here. You think back on the remedies you've tried: the stinging mint, the fizzing beer, the crushed ochre and natron and date syrup. Many of them had mild antibacterial properties. Honey, for instance, is naturally antiseptic. So is frankincense, and the copper in their dental tools, also toxic to bacteria. It's not just intuition, it's observation. Generations of people who paid attention to what worked passed it down, and folded it into chants and rituals to make it memorable. Add in a little mould, a little magic, and suddenly you've got a healthcare system, as rich in metaphor as it is in myrrh. You ask Hui if anyone ever died from mould treatments gone wrong. He shrugs. People die from everything, but pain must be spoken to. That idea has stayed with you, the belief that pain isn't just felt, but engaged, treated with both a poultice and a prayer. You think about Painib's chant about Dedi's clove and laughter balm, about Satsabek wrapping her poultice with muttered blessings. They weren't just medicating, they were negotiating. And perhaps even today we're still doing that, whether through prescription bottles or whispered affirmations on sleepless nights. As the sun sets behind the garden, you help Hui crush dried barley and mould flakes into a bowl. He's preparing a new batch, for a neighbour, for a friend, for whoever comes through the temple gates tomorrow holding their cheek and hoping for peace. Before you leave, he presses a dried sprig of blue lotus into your palm. For dreams, he says, and for once your jaw doesn't throb, not much anyway. Maybe it's the mould. Maybe it's the moment. You're beginning to notice a strange calm settling over your journey. The ache in your jaw is still there, persistent as ever, but it's no longer the star of the show. It's more like a background hum now, a slightly off-key flute in the orchestra of ancient life. Tonight you find yourself wandering through the necropolis again, not to visit a tomb or chase down a healer, but to understand how the Egyptians thought about continuity. What happened after the pain, the poultices, the prayers? What happened when life ended but the toothache didn't? You duck into a burial chamber, still under construction, the limestone walls cool to the touch. A flickering oil lamp reveals delicate carvings along the far wall, a man kneeling before Osiris, a lotus blossom between his teeth. Odd detail, you think. Then again, maybe not. You remember the opening of the mouth ritual, a key part of the funerary process, meant to restore the senses of the deceased's sight, smell, taste, and most critically, speech. Without it, a soul could not eat in the afterlife, could not pray, could not defend itself before the divine judges. And what's a mouth that can't open worth? Some tombs include tiny tools designed just for this rite, adze-like instruments, miniature spoons, mouth-shaped amulets. You spot one now, resting inside a niche, a small copper hook, its edge dulled with time, but still carrying the solemn weight of ceremony. It hits you they prepared for toothaches even after death. There are records both in scrolls and in burial goods of dental equipment being interred with the deceased. Small scrapers, chunks of incense, even jars of preserved poultices, all neatly packed beside the body, just in case their molars flared up somewhere between Duat and the field of reeds. Historians still debate whether these were practical tools, symbolic items, or comforting tokens for the families left behind. Maybe a bit of all three. As you make your way through the tomb, you come across an offering table. Dried figs, flat bread, a small cup of wine, and next to it, a neatly folded strip of linen stained faintly green. Moldy bread. You smile. There's something deeply human about it, this mix of superstition and intention, of wanting to ease pain even when it's probably no longer felt. You exit into the night air, the stars blanketing the sky in a soft, shimmering hush. In the distance you hear the gentle lap of the Nile against the banks. The afterlife in Egyptian thought wasn't some distant place, it was here, just behind the veil, just beneath the sand. And just like in life, the dead needed their tools, their offerings, and yes, their dental kits. You sit by the water chewing slowly on a sprig of mint, thinking about how meticulous the Egyptians were in planning for what came next. They built pyramids for bones, wrote spells for hearts, and tucked herbs behind molars that might never ache again. But what if they did? What if the dead kept chewing ghost bread in ghost mouths under ghost stars? It's a comforting thought in a strange way, because it means that pain wasn't feared, it was prepared for. That suffering, no matter how inevitable, didn't get the last word. Not if moldy bread had anything to say about it. You return to the river, one last time, your jaw quieter now, more echo than ache. The Nile flows slowly, calmly, as if even it has grown drowsy with the weight of so many centuries. You sit on a smooth stone near the bank, surrounded by swaying reeds and the distant chatter of frogs, and reflect on all the strange soothing things you've learned. Your thoughts drift to the very beginning of this journey. Paneb smearing that first lump of fuzzy bread onto your aching gum. Back then it felt absurd, desperate even, but now it feels gentle, intentional, a little bit brilliant, and a little bit ridiculous. The perfect balance. Egyptians didn't fear pain the way we do. They respected it, saw it as a teacher, a sign, a message from the body, yes, but also from the cosmos. And when the body spoke, they answered. Not with silence or shame, but with herbs and honey, with songs and smirks, and yes, with mouldy bread wrapped in linen and soaked in beer. You've met the SWNW, the street healers, the scribes who copy mouth spells with sleepy reverence. You've watched workers hold cloves between their teeth like quiet talismans, and you've heard the temple priests say, pain must be spoken to. You've learned that in Egypt the mouth wasn't just a hole for chewing, it was a gateway, a sacred threshold, and like all thresholds, it needed maintenance. A cracked molar wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a potential spiritual hazard. If your mouth faltered, your prayers might fumble, your name might slip, your place in the afterlife might stutter. That's why they packed poultices beside the dead. Why they blessed toothbrush twigs and offered lotus-flavoured breath charms to the gods. Why they chanted as they applied paste and whispered through the burn of natron rinses. Because the Egyptians knew something we forget in our rush toward pills and progress sometimes. Healing isn't about curing, it's about caring. About the moment someone sits beside you, touches your face gently, and says, "Here, try this. I think it might help." You rise from your stone and stroll the quiet path home. In the shadows you see familiar faces, Beck laughing through his 3 teeth, Deddy rubbing crocodile balm into her arms, Nefru grinding copper and cloves into a fragrant dust. They're all part of the story now. Your story. As you step through your doorway, you glance at the small bundle sitting near your bed. A strip of linen, a jar of honey, a few dried mint leaves. A homemade kit. Just in case. You lie down on your mat, the breeze from the window, lifting the curtain in soft, slow breaths. The pain is still there, barely, but you're not afraid of it anymore. Because now you know how to listen. Because now, even in silence, you can speak its name. Because now you are ready for rest. And now let your eyes grow heavier, like the warm linen wraps of a careful hand laying you gently to sleep. The Nile drifts far away now, carrying with it the sounds of sandals in dust, the low hum of temple songs, the soft scraping of stone against grain. The mouths of Egypt close slowly behind you, not in pain, not in fear, but in peace. You've walked with the SUNW through incense-thick doorways, sat beside fires where cracked smiles still laughed, whispered to the gods with a poultice pressed gently to your cheek. You've tasted the bitter balm of clove and beer and held mouldy bread, not with disgust, but with quiet respect. And now all of that fades. Let the hiss of the wind through papyrus calm you. Let the memory of warm bread and a hand on your shoulder soothe you. You are safe. You are still. And nothing hurts here, not anymore. No more grinding stones. No more chants or scrolls or aching jaws. Just sleep. Deep and slow like the river that never rushes. You are floating now, through stars and sand and time, somewhere between then and now, between pain and peace, between breath and silence. Let go. Rest. Dream of reed boats and soft linen of lotus flowers and voices that never falter. You've come far. You've listened well. Now it's time to sleep. Sleep. Sleep